Good morning, everyone.
So you have the floor.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to give you a presentation this morning on the competency scheme and the national registration scheme that's being used in Ireland at the moment. So just to put things in context, I'm sure most of you know where Ireland is relative to the rest of Europe, but I've just blown up the map of Ireland here for two reasons. First of all, what we're going to talk about today is relative to the Republic of Ireland, so everything that's shown in the darker colour green here. Northern Ireland is covered under the regulations from the UK. You can also see here that Ireland is divided into, or the Republic of Ireland rather, is divided into 26 counties, and that will be relevant in a moment as I go through the presentation. So our national building regulations are administered by a single department of government, and they devise the planning standards and implement the building regulations, and these are typically updated every 3 to 4 years. The Republic of Ireland itself is a relatively small island with a population of 4.6 million people, and the regulations are set at a national level. So unlike some of the other countries in Europe, there are not variances for various areas or regions. It's a single building regulation for the entire country. So we've had our share of difficulty in the last number of years with our economy, and the construction industry effectively collapsed in 2007 and 2008. But there was a very, very heavy reliance on the construction industry at the time. So it meant that there was a lot of unemployment. And I suppose this graph really demonstrates very clearly what happened to the construction industry. It was definitely a boom and a bust. And the figure of just under 10,000 completed new dwellings in 2012 was repeated in 2013. Now, it is certainly getting better, but it's by no means a return to normality, not yet. The point about this was when things collapsed in 2007, 2008, a lot of people looked for new avenues to continue some kind of employment, and a lot of people would have invested in blower door equipment at the time, but had nowhere to use them because the houses weren't being built. So since 2007, the building regulations in Ireland have significantly improved. Now, this is coincidental, I suppose, with the collapse of the construction industry, but we went from a situation from having probably not particularly well-enforced regulations and in an energy perspective, not particularly good regulations, to now where I would say probably have some of the best regulations in Europe in terms of energy requirements. And also, since March of this year, there's been a major implementation in the law in relation to building control and how the checking of the construction prior to construction, during construction, and signing off at the end of the construction has been significantly improved. So I suppose all of this has been driven, I suppose, by local legislation and local decisions, but most of it, quite honestly, is coming from Europe, whether it's the EPBD and the drive towards NZEVs by 2020. So in the 2007-2008 version of building regulations, airtightness testing of dwellings was introduced as being mandatory in Ireland. So this was a major step where we went from a position where very, very few houses were being tested for airtightness, typically ones that were only being sought by the customer who wanted to build, for example, a passive house or another type of low energy house, and they engaged with their architect and insisted on an airtightness test happening to it becoming mandatory. It has taken a while, I suppose, for the construction industry to get used to this idea, but it's very much understood, I think, now by the construction industry that they have to do an airtightness test. But it's at the moment it's on dwellings only, not on commercial buildings. So in 2008, the performance level of 10 cubic meters per hour per meter squared, or the Q50, was set as the acceptable upper limit. I suppose this, for most people, when they look at this who understand air tightness, will realize that this is not a very difficult target to achieve. But quite interestingly, what happened was, when it was introduced as being mandatory, any kind of mandatory testing, I suppose, would have frightened and challenged the industry. But once people realized that they could pass this level, very quickly they have come to get quite engaged about doing air tightness testing and trying to improve the testing rates that they're getting. So what we're seeing happening is that as we go out and we do tests, people are trying to at least match the last test value that they got, if not beat it. And this, along with other measures that are being implemented, is driving up the quality of the construction where construction is happening. And it's very evident to see that both the builder as the building company, but also the various tradespeople who are coming on site, plumbers and electricians and so on, are also recognizing the importance of leaving the building airtight. And I would say that their practices on site have become a lot better over the last 3 or 4 years on how they're treating buildings and the kind of penetrations that they're making, and making sure that the penetrations are sealed up. So obviously in Ireland we are also using EN 13829 as our testing standard, and most of the testers in Ireland, up until very recently, the training they would have received would have been from the manufacturer of the blower door equipment once they bought it. So there is a requirement to test every single new dwelling, unless those dwellings are on a building site. On a building site, the building regulations, as you can see here, require that a number of units or a sample regime of units are tested. And this table that you see here is in force up to the moment. But what we're starting to find is that a lot of builders actually realize the value of air leakage testing and are testing far more dwellings than on the table here. They're using it as a quality control check for all the various tradespeople on site, and I think they're also using it as a sales tool when they're talking to people who are interested in buying houses, where they're aware that by controlling ventilation, you end up with ultimately a better build. So I know builders who are certainly testing all their houses, even though they mightn't necessarily have a requirement for it, and are using this to prove to clients that they're a better house. One of the drivers behind getting the houses tested is that the value from the air leakage test can be inputted into the calculation for the EPBD and will improve the outcome of that. So there's the maximum upper limit, and then if you are using a value that's below the maximum upper limit, you have to test each and every house. So when the 2011 regulations came out, a performance level of 7 cubic meters, the performance level was changed to improve it to 7 cubic meters from 10. I don't think the building authorities are inclined to go beyond that at the moment as a standard, but in reality, very many of the houses that we're testing are obviously achieving a value far better than that. So again, just to reiterate that, if because of the energy performance calculation, the energy consultant has used a value that's better than the 7 cubic meters per meter squared per hour, the value, each and every house must be tested. So if they can get the building compliant with the energy, particularly with the energy performance criteria, they can continue to use the 7 cubic meters per meter squared per hour and only test the sample regime, the table that we looked at. But if they're using a value that's better than that, then they have to test each and every dwelling and input that value into the energy calculation. The building regulations also state that the tests should be carried out by a person certified to be independent, and they must be registered with the National Standards Authority of Ireland or equivalent. So I suppose the first point here is that the building company themselves cannot undertake the test and provide a certified test at the end. It must be an independent company. So at the moment, there are a total of 13 registered testers in Ireland, which might not seem a whole lot, but probably only 12 to 15 months ago there was only one. So the people that you're seeing here are people typically who will have been in the airtightness testing business for anywhere between the last 4 and 10 years. But because it is now mandatory to have the test done by an independent certified tester, have gone on and registered with the National Standards Authority of Ireland. So this gives you an idea of the geographical spread of where the testers are located, and the red dots on the screen indicate the major population centres of Dublin, Galway, Limerick and Cork. So there's a good geographical distribution, and I'm sure that those numbers will be added to. And this is the actual certificate stamp that we are allowed to use, for example, on our websites or on any reports that we are generating to prove that we're a member of the testing scheme. I'm often asked what are the kind of fees that are involved in becoming a certified tester. So again, this is available on the Standards Authority's website, and this will give you an idea of the kind of costs that are involved. So the next steps, we're assuming that there's going to be continued registration by new testers, or maybe if not new people, people who have been testing for a while but haven't actually gone on and registered with the National Standards Authority of Ireland. But it is fair to say that there is a core group of long-standing professional testers, and we would often communicate with one another about our methodologies and the type of equipment that we're using and so on. There has also been an inclusion of the ability of a tester to test commercial buildings using a single fan. So at the moment, it's not a requirement that a commercial or industrial building has to have an air leakage test, but it is becoming more common that it is being specified either by the architect or by the customer that it has an air leakage test. And certainly there's a major schools construction program here in Ireland. Typically all of the schools must have an air leakage test done on completion to prove the validity of the airtightness layer. We're going to start to see, I suppose, more multi-fan testing because of commercial buildings, and Stephanie Rossmeyer from Blower GmbH was here in Ireland training some of us recently. That went very well, and we are in the process of starting, I suppose, to set up a competent testers association who will represent an industry body, I suppose, in negotiations with both the National Standards Authority of Ireland and the other relevant authorities on what can be achieved, and anything new that's coming to the market in relation to equipment or testing standards or methodologies, particularly from continental Europe. I think it's fair to say that the biggest impact that the National Standards Authority of Ireland, that the scheme has had, is that it has centralised information in relation to how the tests can be done using a common standard and common expectations, so that if various testers were to turn up and test the same house, they should be producing the same report, the same outcomes, and achieving the same test results. It has probably brought together and improved on the good work that was being done, but it's being shown that there is now a more common set of standards across all the testers. So, if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to take them.